Someone will leave the bag with the ice cream melting in the car and throw your blue cashmere sweater in the dryer. Your husband will sleep with a girl your daughter's age, her breasts spilling out of her blouse, or your wife will remember that she is a lesbian and leave you for the woman next door. The other cat, the one you never really liked, will contract a disease that requires you to pry its mouth, its feverish mouth open every 4 hours for a month. Your parents will die. No matter how many vitamins you take, how much Pilates, how much you will lose your keys and your hair and your memory. If your daughter doesn't plug her heart into every live socket she passes, you'll come home to find that your son has emptied your refrigerator, dragged it to the curb, and called the used appliance store for a pickup. Drug money. There is a Buddhist story of a woman chased by a tiger. When she comes to the cliff, she sees a sturdy vine and climbs halfway down. But there's also a tiger below, and 2 mice, one white, one black, scurry out and begin to gnaw at the vine. At this point, she notices a wild strawberry growing from a crevasse. She looks up, she looks down at the mice, and then she eats the strawberry. So here's the view, the breeze, the pulse in your throat. Oh, taste how sweet, taste how tart the red juice is, how the tiny sides crunch between your teeth. This story of a person being chased by a tiger is a very old Buddhist teaching. I first heard it at the Unitarian Church in Baltimore, which is my home congregation, the place where I first discovered Unitarian Universalism 30 years ago. I remember hearing this story and just delighting in this paradox. Tiger above, tiger below, mice gnawing through her lifeline, and yet her choice is to reach out for the beauty of a single strawberry. And this is how I want to end my days on this earth, with an abundance of love and gratitude. If I'm lucky to have some time and mental capacity at the end, I don't want those final hours or those final days to be full of gnawing regret, blaming God or others for my misfortunes. I want strawberries. Now, I knew that if this is the end that I wanted for myself, then I would have to set a course for my life with that in mind, kind of reverse engineering. Now, I know it may seem like a strange goal for a young person. Some may even call this morbid, but to me, it made perfect sense. Even though I was so far from the trailhead, I couldn't even see that path. Then I was in my mid-20s, newly married and settled into a tiny row house. I wasn't even looking for a new church. In fact, I still had a bad taste in my mouth from the last non-denominational rock and roll church I had attended. In those days, I walked to work every day, and my route took me down Charles Street, right next to an impressive building that has been standing on that corner since 1818, the first Unitarian Church of Baltimore. I had no idea what this place was. I mean, what exactly was a Unitarian? I had never heard of that before. Across the street was the Theosophical Society. I thought maybe it was like that, or maybe it was a cult. I had no idea. Every week, new messages were posted on their outdoor sign. interesting sermon titles and quotes by people like Maya Angelou, Vonnegut, and Tagore. And then one day there was a poster outside announcing a drag show in the parish hall. Okay, now I've got to go and find out what's going on in there. One Sunday morning, I finally got up the nerve to walk through those huge wooden doors. And what I saw inside really astonished me. I grew up in an immigrant church, Korean Presbyterians in Toledo, Ohio. We never owned our own building. We rented space wherever we could. And so I've seen a lot of different Protestant church buildings. But this one was unlike anything I'd ever seen, and it felt like it was created just for me. Above the marble altar, a massive glass mosaic of the Last Supper made from colorful iridescent Tiffany glass. And below it, 5 plaques representing Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Confucianism. I sat in the back row and I cried through the entire service. Tears of relief and awe and wonder met a welcome that was wider than I ever thought possible. They invited me to enter with my entire being, to bring my doubts and my disbelief and my question, to wonder right alongside them about who or what God is, to step into a centuries-old tradition of radical protest against all that oppresses body and mind. The other part of this exquisite invitation would take another decade for me to really understand. And this is our faith's invitation to wholeness. Our widest welcome extends not only to people of various abilities, sexualities, racial identities, but it also extends to our stories of sorrow, our experiences of pain, by showing us that saying yes to life means saying yes to the whole thing, to receive the entire gift covered with the ugly, the heavy, the hard, the trials, the drudgery, the heartbreak. When we lost our first child to miscarriage, that was my first real experience of heartache. And I had no idea what to do with it. In addition to the deep sorrow, I felt so much shame and failure that I couldn't respond to the kindness of others. I pulled away because I couldn't bear to feel anything. Going to church would only touch that pain more. And what would be the point in that? Many years later, and many, many losses later, I would come to understand that we actually need heartbreak because this is how we become whole human beings. The late Reverend Nancy Schaefer was my colleague in Virginia, and she was a gifted poet. She wrote, "This making of a self takes such a very long time. Pieces are not sequential, nor are supplies. We work here, then there, hold up tattered fabric to the light, sew past dark intent, use all our thread. Sleeves may come before length, buttons before a rounded neck. We sew at what most needs us, and as it asks, sew again. The self is not one thing once made unaltered, not midnight task alone, not after other work. It's everything. It's everything we come upon, make ours. All this fitting of what once was and has become. Heartbreak is the way we become a whole self. Yet so many of us want to leave what once was on the sewing room floor. I mean, why pick up that tattered mess? What would be the point? We know that heartbreak, grief, pain, regret, they're all a part of life. I mean, we know that there will be shattered dreams and opportunities not taken, unrequited love, and people will die before anyone is ready. Because we inhabit these fragile bodies and live on this fragile earth with billions of others, we suffer all kinds of grief. There's the heartbreak that comes with knowing what damage we do to the earth and her creatures. There's the deep sadness of ancestral grief, what the Korean people call Han, carried from generation to generation. There's the pain of knowing that we unwittingly take part in systems of injustice and inequity. It can be hard to see any value in embracing these painful experiences. How could heartbreak ever be useful when it feels like just the opposite is true? That these feelings are the enemy of happiness, something that takes away and robs us of a fuller life. Bad things happen and we want to rage against it. Like Job, we insist it's not fair. We curse and complain, we blame and mount our defense. Hey, we've been good. We pay our taxes, we're kind to small animals and children. What then is the meaning of this pointless suffering? If we're not blaming and complaining, sometimes we respond by stuffing the painful emotions down a deep, dark hole and run away as fast as we can. But we can't run fast enough because, as the poet David White reminds us, heartbreak is part and parcel of every path, asking for its due in every sincere course an individual takes. Some of us try to numb ourselves with overconsumption. Name your poison. The offerings seem to grow every year. Or we can try to insulate ourselves, stay far away from other people, build a wall, lock the doors. Eventually, we learn that we can't numb ourselves to the bad feelings without also numbing ourselves to the awesome ones. And we can't insulate ourselves without losing the ability to connect with and to be empathetic toward others. There's an old story about a reclusive man who stopped going to church. After several weeks, the pastor knocked on his door. Without a word, the man pointed to the chair next to the hearth. The pastor and the man sat in silence, watching the burning pile of coals. After a while, the pastor reached for the tongs. He picked up one of the burning coals and set it apart from the rest of the pile. When it had stopped glowing and turned cold, the pastor picked it up again and put it next to the burning pile. It began to glow brightly again. Without a word, the pastor left, and the following week, the man returned to church. After losing our baby and several more pregnancies after that, instead of facing the pain of those losses, I stuffed all my feelings in a suitcase and took the first plane to a geographic cure. Florida. Dolphins, sunsets, pink sand, blue water. I ran and ran, hid from myself, overfed myself, overworked myself. On the outside, I looked like a well-adjusted, successful, professional person with a good life. But on the inside, I was miserable, disconnected, lost, and far, far away from that strawberry. My life felt like an endless series of problems to be solved, situations and people to be managed, lists to be checked off, and pain to be avoided. I thought I was pursuing happiness, whatever that means, when that's not what I ever wanted. What I really wanted was to be whole, to be healed. I began to wonder, as Barbara Brown Taylor once said, if my human wholeness might be more useful to God than my exhausting goodness. I finally got so tired of myself that I stopped running. I stood still, turned around, and faced the what once was. Heartbreak doesn't have to rob us of life. Instead, we can listen to the advice of David White and choose to see it as the natural outcome of caring deeply for people and things over which we have no control. It is the natural outcome of caring deeply for people and things over which we have no control. Heartbreak offers an experience of raw life in its most elemental form. It provides an antidote to that part of our world that denies death and pathologizes grief. If you only follow secular culture, especially the dominant white supremacist patriarchal culture, there is no way to understand the gifts of heartbreak. That part of our world just wants us to buy more stuff, watch more videos, drink more booze. Choosing to embrace grief and pain doesn't make any sense from that worldview. What you have to do is see through the eyes of someone like Fra Giovanni. You have to feel through the hearts of poets. You have to listen through the ears of the prophets. And that's why spirituality is so important, whatever expression that takes in your life. Being a member of a religious community like this one is a countercultural act. With one hand, we resist the status quo that keeps us satisfied with living half a life. And with the other hand, we reach out to receive every joy, every sorrow, everything we come upon. During these holy winter days, my prayer for each one of you is to find a way to sew together all of the pieces of your life and to hold the heartbreaks in a way that doesn't overwhelm you, but rather allows you to be more of who you are, so that you can be a light in the world. And so that when the day comes, I pray that you will meet your final hours with a hearty, abiding thankfulness. Amen. Make it so.